Hi, I'm Maya Shenfeld, and you're watching Thrill Jockey's Deep Digs. So the first record I wanted to talk about was Colleen's Captain of None. I think it came out around 2015, and at the time I couldn't stop listening to it. Though it's really hard to pick just one record by Colleen, but anyway, this is one of my favorites. I think generally what I really like about Colleen as a musician is the way that she normally picks a color palette, so a set of instruments, and she really engages with the material, so she really makes the most out of the instrument she's playing. And I think especially these days where gear and instruments are accessible to a certain extent, perhaps more accessible than they were in the 60s, since I really respect musicians that, focus on a certain sound or color and just stick to it and make the most out of it. And it's really inspiring to hear what she's doing. I like the way that she's integrating an early music instrument like the viola da gamba into an electronic processing process. And her electronics are also somewhat kind of analog, so she's doing it all live, generating all these loops. I mean, it's amazing to watch her perform this record live. I think there's a show on YouTube that you can listen to and watch at the same time. And so through, creating layers of loops on top of each other, she really creates this ambience and this, on one hand, meditative, sometimes even dancey. I think she has this big tom on stage, generating these kind of dub sounding patterns. And I just like this formative approach. So it sounds like, on one hand, very intimate, like a musician kind of improvising in her studio and creating pieces in a very free flow. But on the other hand, it's very, very specific. And so it's really inspiring. Next record I wanted to talk about is Borders by Empty Set. My favorite track on this record is Dissolve. I'm obviously biased because James Ginsburg is a good friend and I met Paul several times, so I love the music and happy to talk about it a bit. So obviously there's this long Bristol influence there, but for me this music also is very much about Berlin industrial techno, or I don't know if they'd refer it as techno, to it as techno, and I think the interesting thing for me in this record, but generally about their practice, is the way they think about structure, time, and processes. From what I know that they're interested in kind of picking a set of rules, or setting up a set of rules that they work with and go from there, really researching and exploring the materiality of the sounds they're working with or working conceptually. And I think this can always be a really good way to start, to work in the studio, and it's really inspiring to hear of other musicians' way of doing things. And the sound design and production on this record is absolutely amazing. So we have this dystopian, heavily distorted, compressed sound on one hand, and on the other hand, it's really sound sculpting, because I think they're really working with the partials. And what happens is that despite this kind of brutal, in-your-face, distorted music, you have these very subtle partials that really, really come through, and it turns into this meditative drone, also by the fact that they just stick to it from the beginning until the end. So you really get into it, and you're just in the zone listening to the music, and it's really beautiful. Thinking about also the production, it was such a pleasure collaborating with James Ginsburg from Empty Set on my track Mountain Larkspur. And I think you can hear a little bit of the Empty Set or James Ginsburg's production magic on it. This record just came out and it's amazing. We've got Living None But Small Birds by The Buddy and Big Brave. Two bands I actually, confession, wasn't very familiar with up until I found out I'm going to be releasing on Thrill Jockey, and I started deep diving into their artist roster, and I'm really, really glad I got to know both bands. And while I started listening to The Buddy and Big Brave, I was actually quite surprised when I got this record. It starts with this beautiful, clean, bluesy guitar riff, and then it shifts into these folky melodies, and there's this fiddle in the first track, which is really, really beautiful. And it's just, in comparison to the kind of experimental metal that both bands do on their own, it's quite surprising, but it's quite strong, and I love Robin's voice on this record. And another thing that I really appreciate about it is the fact that two bands, I don't know the backstory, but the fact that two bands got together and made a record together. Especially with electronic music, it seems like we're all sort of shifting towards solo practice. So I too love collaborating, and I just really, it's quite inspiring to hear a record that is a combination of two bands working together, and this is what's come out. And yeah, favorite detail about it is the tambourine. I love it. And well, I mean, I'm also a guitarist, so the guitar production on this record is absolutely amazing. And the distortion and overdrive. I mean, all the obvious stuff, but it's just so good. Last record I wanted to talk about, but not least, is Marisa Anderson's Cloud Corner. This one's been heavy on rotation during lockdown, actually, for me, and it's just beautiful. Every time I hear the first track of the song, I'm like, wow, I really want to be friends with this person. I love the drop tunings that she's using, the open tunings. I love her sound, and I know that she's self-producing, so that's a big part of her practice. And what can I say? I'm a fan. And Angels First is one of my favorite tracks in this record. Just the way she's bending the strings, this kind of like the bluesy references, and the finger picking, and the sense of time. So she's, it's really reflective in the way it's really, taking time. And I feel like it's funny, like talking about these 4 records, one after each other, so many different artists and different genres of music, which is what I love about Thrill Jockey. Somehow it all connects because each one of these records really invites you to a different listening space, and all of them in a sense are a bit meditative or, create this sort of an atmosphere. And despite the fact that these are very, very different musical genres, they all make sense together. So it's kind of exciting to join this label. And on a more personal level, so I am trained as a classical guitarist, and ever since I drifted off to composition, free improv, playing with bands, doing all sorts of different music things, I sadly have less and less time to just practice and play my beautiful classical guitar, or spend less time playing guitar and more time playing with synths or other things. And every time I listen to this record, it really makes me think, I really want to play my guitar again. I really want to spend time with my guitar, and I'm very grateful for this inspiration from Marisa. Thanks for watching. I'm Maya Shenfeld, and my new record In Freefall will be out on January 22 on Thrill Jockey Records.